as things continue to, we believe, move ahead. At the same time, I have a heavy heart this morning. Susan Baker passed away last evening, and she in Rapid City, and probably a year or so old complication from intensive radiation treatment for cancer. She's had some internal bleeding and so forth, and in the course of conducting a search for that, went into cardiac arrest, and they got a heartbeat and so forth, but it was just artificial. So about 10 o'clock last night, the decision was made to go ahead and end those kinds of efforts, and she passed away within minutes. Ken's, we really need to pray for Ken. They were married 57 years, met on a blind date, got married after 4 months, and it's just a case where she was the core, she was just the heart of his life. And so I'm just pray for him. The Lord helped us through it. Those are very, very difficult things. But at any rate, we have no plans at this point yet. Those will begin probably forming tomorrow. So as soon as we do have any plans for service, we'll get that out to everyone. So these is part of life in general. It's also part of the life in a church where we handle it differently. I really think that I don't know the doctrine of when a soul leaves its house. If we are being kept alive totally artificially, is my soul already in heaven? I don't know. But if that's the case, and in her case, I felt Jesus took her in the afternoon, not at 10 o'clock at night. So, and I don't have any question. She loved God, served God, loved His Word, taught His Word, knew her, pastored her for 20 years. So that is something we weep with those who weep and sustain them. It's not altogether a shift to move to what we experienced in our trip to Europe involving the 75th anniversary of D-Day. That was somber too. When you know the sacrifice that was made. Things just seem to work out time-wise. It really doesn't feel, by the way, today doesn't feel like 4th of July to me because it's still how many ever days off. But it was a real privilege to be there. And once again, I want to apologize for the quality of the pictures. We haven't run them through on the screen yet. I have no idea. Basically, I gave these to Jessica. So, just want you to remember that, okay? She got them about, what, I don't know, 3 or 4 o'clock yesterday, and that's enough time, and so, at any rate, we first went to England, saw a lot of Wesley, John and Charles Wesley sites, and then Germany, and saw a lot of Luther, which we've looked at the last 2 Sundays. And then we spent about 6 days in Normandy. And so this, I'm going to try, I hope this will work there. And starting right out, I don't think you can read that. Can you read that? Oh yeah, it's better there. This is in one of the chapels in the cemeteries on government property. How many of you are really upset about that? Things about religion. Notice it says, Almighty God, our sons. This is the prayer FDR prayed over the radio the night before D-Day. Pride of our nation, this day, have set upon a mighty endeavor, a struggle to preserve our republic, our religion, our civilization. They will be sore tried by night and by day without rest until the victory is won. Some will never return. Embrace these, Father, and receive them, thy heroic servants, into thy kingdom. I want us to look then at three places we saw and participated in activities that were going on at that time. This is the first place we saw, which is Utah Beach. That's, of course, a scene as it looks like today. Utah Beach, there's a great inlet, and then Omaha is over to the east. And this Utah Beach is on the other side of this inlet where a river comes in. And it was much less, it still had casualties, of course, but it was much less defended than Omaha, and there were less lives lost there. And this is just another look down the beach. It's eerie almost to see how peaceful and clear and clean, and then see pictures of what it looked like on that particular day. Then this is one more with a gun emplacement you can see in the front that was defending it, that they took out early. This is the museum. Frankly, I felt, and of course there's so much to see you can hardly catch everything, but I felt that the Utah Museum was better than at Omaha Beach, at least. Omaha is the more known or whatever, popular, but much of the 82nd Airborne and 101st Airborne that came in on gliders or parachuted out of, I think it was C-47s, was around the Utah Beach area. Many of them, of course, miles off of their target, and so they were lost, and many of them drowned in the marshes that they were inadvertently dropped over. It's hard to imagine what they were dealing with. This is a Higgins boat that they had there at the Utah Museum, and that held 30 soldiers. There were many cases where, as those came in and then they dropped that ramp on the beach, and of course machine guns were trained on them. There were many reports of as many as everyone, 28 or 29 of the soldiers in one of these boats perished with a mortar or something that was a direct hit. It was, I don't know how 17-year-olds and 18-year-olds, I don't know how they did it, except I had this clear sense, even though there is the camaraderie, there's maybe superior firepower and all that, you can't ever take God out of it. The scripture is full. God went to war with Israel every time they went out. He made the plans for them, and he said, I'll lead you out and I'll help you. And one of God's names that's used all through scripture is the God of battle. I'm not going to get off into this. It's okay if there are people that honestly feel to be, a conscientious objector, but God's not a pacifist. He didn't like war, but he can do it pretty good. Now this is the inside of a church, St. Mary Iglesias or something like that, and that is just a quarter of a mile from the museum I just showed you. This is the church. If you ever have seen pictures or there's a movie, can't remember which one it is, but it shows a paratrooper caught on the spire of a church. Anybody ever seen that picture? I think it was maybe in a John Wayne movie on D-Day. But this is that little community, small little village church. And the 82nd Airborne parachuted in there. And one of the paratroopers, his parachute caught on a spire, and he was just hanging right in front of the bell tower. The Germans, of course, could see him, and they were firing at him. They wounded him. They didn't kill him. He ended up cutting himself free and fell 25 or 30 feet to one roof, off onto the ground, injured severely, but ended up surviving. And just outside the front doors of that, there's a picture from the outside, and they have, for D-Day, they put a parachute up there where, on the spire that this paratrooper was caught. So you can see how high he was hanging there. You probably can't see the mannequin they have right below the parachute. But at any rate, that was a famous picture. And this guy on the right that I'm talking to was, he's 95 or 96, and he's from Missoula, except he says he spends most of his time in Arizona now. Character of a guy, very spry, but he was an 82nd Airborne who parachuted into that village. That village was the first village in all of France that was liberated. It was liberated actually in the middle of the night of June 5th because they parachuted in before. He was very interesting to talk to, and we saw 4 or 5 D-Day veterans that were out among people. It was amazing the number of people, and you could almost hear the rippling of the conversation. There's a veteran, there's a veteran, there's a veteran. And people just gathered around them. Everybody wanted pictures with him. And I came back with 2 things. One, a better appreciation for at least the local, rural, run-of-the-mill, grassroots French people. The gratitude they show still is, I was shocked. The second thing I was encouraged with, sort of, not encouraged as much, was the millennials. Okay, there were young Americans, about like Jessica's age, Jessica and Casey. We tell them they're millennials. Tanner and Katie, you know, they're everywhere. And we all know that they don't amount to anything and they don't care about anything. We know that. I was really encouraged with there were tons of Americans there. This was massively attended. The young American kids, high school, college, that would crowd around these guys and ask them, get them to sign stuff, get their picture taken. It heartened me that, you know, all isn't lost. Somehow they're getting from someplace an appreciation for our history and those who sacrificed for it. This is an encampment. I cannot tell you, and I'll probably better keep moving here, but I can't tell you the number of these kind of encampments, which is difficult for you to see. But there, apparently, I read somewhere over there, that there was a neighborhood of 750,000 vehicles left in Europe. Jeeps, half-tracks, personnel carriers, tanks, those duck boats, all kinds of stuff. Every one of those vehicles that you can see there, if you can, Jeeps and so forth, are original. They're recovered, they're restored. They got them, they're still getting them out of barns and things. I asked one guy who was there with a Jeep, and it was a radio Jeep, and he'd figured, he restored the whole thing. He was Canadian, and he went all the way over with his Jeep to this for the 75th. And I asked him, how do you find these? Are they still around? He said, not much more, but he paid, I think 10 or 15 years ago, he said he paid $25,000 for the Jeep, and it was a mess. But I was stunned. The thousands of people dressed in original Army uniforms, the old helmet, driving these Jeeps in convoys, 15, 20, 30 of them in a row. Again, half tracks, whatever, and they were on the Autobahn, or Autobahn, going to Normandy, to these kind of reenactment or something, I don't know. But I was stunned at the number of people that were honoring what our country did. This is just one then. We spent half a day looking at all that stuff. Then, now this is Omaha Beach. So Utah, the pictures up till now were at Utah Beach. Then we went on a different day to Omaha Beach. That's the marker, which you probably can't read. There's another picture of an awful peaceful looking beach now. And that's kind of in the middle looking. This is just, some memorial stuff that they put up there on the beach. This is what now it looks like from the water's edge, charging as soldiers would have into that village, which was right on the edge of the beach. I don't think you can see these very well. At the top, yeah, the top is prior to D-Day. Well, all three of these pictures show some of the mansions and so forth that they have. Were there. You can't, I don't know how well you can see this, but you see that one building left standing and ships out there. Everything, of course, was just completely destroyed. This is down back on Omaha Beach, and this is one of those personnel carriers that they had restored. And I thought maybe these were a bunch of Americans that had gone over there. I went up to some of them, and they were speaking French, so I let them go. But they're all, most of them are French. They're just crazy about Americans. One guy thought we were English, and he said, are you returning to England? He was a French guy, barely could speak English. We said, no, we're Americans. I mean, his face just lit up, and he kind of straightened up, and his eyes got big. Americans. They don't like the British very well anyway. But at any rate, the French were pretty amazing. Those are those, what are those, well, I can't think this morning, on the beach there. And that is a bagpipe from an army regiment of Scottish army that were there playing on the beach. Now this is an Omaha Beach veteran. If I recall talking to him, he was either 18 or 19. He was in I think he was in the second wave on Omaha. His job was retrieving body parts. Not just bodies, but parts. I don't know how an 18-year-old can do that, and it has to stay with you the rest of your life. We didn't meet one of these guys that weren't very willing to talk and their pictures taken and so forth. And he signed a card that he had with him, gave it to Cameron. Now the first veteran I showed was the only one that we saw that was on his feet. None of them we met were younger than 95. Most of them then either were canes, wheelchairs, whatever. You look at them and you look at what age has done to them, and in some cases injuries, wounds from that battle. You wonder, it's just sad what aging does, and that we know that there aren't going to be many of these men left. I think that's why this 75th was a special event. Now this is the third place I want to look at where huge battles took place that were significant. Utah Beach, Omaha Beach, and a part of Omaha, which is this, Pointe du Hoc. Pointe du Hoc was where the Rangers climbed about 100-foot cliffs. They improvised mortar-fired grappling hooks and shot them up and hoped that they caught something. And then they climbed up on these ropes and some very small metal ladders that came in sections they could put together. The Germans, meanwhile, there were gun emplacements all over here, and all of the bombing by the Air Force missed the target. There are craters all over the place, but they're real sharp kind of craters. They don't look like bomb craters. And it turned out that the Army Air Force, there was bad cloud cover, and so all of the bombing that was supposed to take out the German bunkers, gun emplacements, missed. Once the fog kind of lifted a bit before they hit the beaches, the battleships sat off and fired 16-inch guns, weigh somewhere over 2,000 pounds. This will help you remember how much they weigh. They weigh as much as an old Volkswagen Beetle, a Bug. So, and they'll go. They threw a Volkswagen Bug 23 miles is how far they'll go. That's a gun. Watching video of that, even color video of those guns firing the whole broadside, just rocking the battleship. It's awesome. It's awe-inspiring. But those made part of the reason they shelled it was not only to destroy the gun placements, which the shelling did some of it, but was to provide craters so the soldiers would have someplace to dig in or hide, or they came up, when they came up the cliffs, this is another way out there where you see that little kind of rock, that's off the point of the Pointe du Hoc. That's closer, and then this is a look back at the cratered area. You can see how it's just torn up still, 75 years later. Now these two pictures are the cliffs. This is looking down from right where they came up. And it was about 100 and some feet, barely 100, 110 feet that they came up. The Germans stood at the top and just rolled grenades off on them as they tried to climb up. This is another picture looking down over those cliffs right off the sidewalk where they came over the top and were just mowed down. This was a gun emplacement that was destroyed. And then this is the monument that is right out at the point, which is maybe 20 yards. Well, that's where those pictures of looking down the cliff were taken, right from that monument. I think we might have taken a picture. Yeah, I don't know if you can read that either. Anyway, a guy named James Rudder was a colonel. A lot of high-ranking officers were in this battle it isn't customary. Generally, colonels don't necessarily get out in the actual battle. There, everybody did. Now, this is another veteran with his daughter and her husband, and we got pictures with him. He was wheelchair bound, well enough he could walk to that, and he wanted to walk up there and get his picture taken. It was a very cold, misty, blustery day, kind of like it was on the actual day of that battle. I don't know if we have a closer picture. We don't, of that veteran. I just threw these in. This is a young soldier that was heroic on that day. And then there should be, this is another one. I don't know if you can read that very well. This was his 4th or 5th amphibious went all through North Africa. When we got back from this trip, just a day or two or three from this trip, we had been gone for 3 weeks. And so rather than seeing any, of you or fellowshipping with anybody we hadn't seen for 3 weeks, we had a higher purpose, and that was to go to Ice Cream Cafe. And so we went to Ice Cream Cafe, and there was a veteran there, World War II veteran hat on. And I was behind him. I didn't see his hat or anything, and I thought, this old person is taking too long. Just get vanilla or something, and, Well, I kind of got around, and Cameron started poking me and says, hey, he's a veteran. And he had World War II veteran. So I changed my attitude about him and talked to him, and he fought all through North Africa and into Sicily and those landings. And, just to stand there and look at him, I don't know. It's kind of hard to explain. But you just have a sense of, I'm looking at someone that towers above me as far as sacrifice and humility. He just did what they wanted him to do. I don't know if you can read this well, but it does say that at the bottom of that cliff, 225 Rangers who were dropped by their Higgins boats 3 miles off a target. They had to carry all their equipment for 3 miles down the beach. And if you notice any of the pictures I took of the cliffs, there is no beach at high tide. So they landed at low tide so there'd be a beach that they could climb up from. They were running against time and the tide to be 3 miles off and still get all their equipment down there. And 225 were at the bottom, and by the afternoon there were 90 left alive. Of those 90, some were wounded, but the rest were killed. Later that day, there were some Rangers. I don't think I took or put a picture in here. There were some Rangers who started out against a farmhouse that was a mile or two away with 125 guys, and by the time they took the farmhouse, there were 13. The rest were dead. I don't have any concept of what that, and these are the kids, the age of the kids we saw a month ago at graduation come across here and introduce themselves. I'm going to go to community college, I'm going to do this. That's who was doing this. This is one of the big gun emplacements this one got hit by one of the shells. And these are all just kept as they were found and as they were left. And so what I wanted to look at in the pictures up till now, the places we saw where heroic and life-changing, history-changing battles were fought. And then people, just a few of the veterans that are still there. Now here's the price. The price they paid. And it just starts with, these are everywhere. There are 17 of these in Europe, a cluster of them there in Normandy. I don't have the time to go into, well, I'll take it quickly. I got 16 minutes. My brother-in-law, who I grew up with in high school in Eugene, Oregon, married my sister, had an uncle who died on D-Day, or shortly after D-Day, and he's buried over there. And this man, Obert Torkelson was his name. Is that Norwegian? My brother-in-law's family, both sides, are Scandinavian. I didn't, of course, know his uncle, but I did know his uncle's mother. She was a member of my father's church and an absolute little white-haired saint of God. Loved God with all of her heart. I still remember the funeral packed out in a large church for her. And she lost her son shortly after D-Day. So Dennis, my brother-in-law, and his daughter flew over, met us at Paris, because only one person had ever been able to see his gravesite in 75 years. So we went and visited that. The curator, or whatever you would call him, of the cemetery, assigned over there as an American, took us, ushered us, took us to the gravesite, brought along a little box of sand off of Omaha Beach itself, and then took that sand and rubbed it into the letters on the cross. A picture won't show up because it's white marble etched into white marble. And so he rubbed that on there, and it filled in the name. Then you can take a picture. The care that's given there, the precision, I was, again, almost speechless, but also proud of our country. How we maintain this, it's just, you don't hear loud voices. I mean, this is acres and acres and acres. This held about almost 5,000 soldiers. Everybody's just talking quiet. There's a sense of awe and reverence, and that you ought to be quiet. If you understand, and that's wonderful. We yak too much. This is the cemetery at Normandy. That one was called St. James, and it was closer to a village that was the site of a great battle. St. Lo, if any of you have read any history of World War II, they were hung up in the hedgerows. It was a bad situation. This is from the Normandy. There's just a little bit of the way they care for all of this. And the manager there that ushered us around pointed out, he said, none of these are done with laser or machines. They are hand clipped and maintained by eyesight. The care is just, it was swarming with people that were clipping stuff and taking care of it. That, if you can, yes, here rests in honored glory a comrade in arms, known but to God. Surprising number of those intermingled with all of those crosses. Then this is a chapel at one of them. And we took a few things, a few pictures there. And I need to back up. Maybe I can't. There. There's another in front of the chapel. You can read that. Even the words, the wording is reverent. Who sleep in unknown graves. You can't go through there without tears coming to your eyes. I want to put the next two pictures, and I think we're maybe getting close to the end, regarding the price. This, you can see the oldest there is a World War II veteran, and to his right is his son, who's retired from the military. And then to that veteran's left are the two young soldiers that are currently in the military, and they were assigned to help him. He was on the stage behind the President Trump and President Macron from France. And at any rate, you look at 3 generations of people who are willing to serve. We know, we can say it lightly, but it's true. We wouldn't be here. We would not be here if these people, as that very first slide I showed, that prayer, for our civilization and our religion, didn't lay their lives down. The next one struck me. This is at Pointe du Hoc, and hope you can see it. This is a dad with his son who is a cadet at he's either at West Point or maybe the Citadel or some, but I looked at that, and this was sort of an accidental picture. We were basically looking at the cliffs across the way, and these people were there. But it struck me, we still have young guys like him and a father willing to support him, serving to keep us free. And he'll be, we hope not, but he'll likely be in harm's way someday. Now that was a day or so before the actual D-Day commemoration. And there's just a few pictures from this. This is the Jumbotron, pictures off of the Jumbotron. And you can see President Trump there, and there were a total of about 1,500 World War II veterans there, not all of them on that stage, but a good number of them were up there behind. They also, I don't know if any of you watched it, but on the front row, and I don't see the picture of her here, but on the front row of that stage was the wife, and she was 97 or 8, the wife of the farmer that owned the property that the cemetery in Normandy now occupies. They owned the farm that the main group of soldiers in Omaha hit the beach and came up into their farmyard. And the wife of the farmer was still living. She was there, and her daughter they introduced them on the front row there on that stage. This is, I don't know if you can see this very well either. Yeah, that's a flyover of some of the old, I think there were C-47s. They were what they, well, it was a transport plane, but they also parachuted out of them. There's the concluding flyover. One of the concluding, there were several. And then I'm a little lost as to where I'm at. Okay, I believe this is the last one. This is at the very edge of the Normandy Cemetery, the Omaha Beach Cemetery, looking down off of just that little rise onto such a tranquil scene. And to stand there and imagine what that looked like then and how different it is today because of what people did and were willing to give on that beach. And a couple thoughts I've had that I just wanted to mention. When there's that kind of sacrifice, one thing that I was grateful for, in fact, I really don't think this was meant as a derogatory remark, but the manager of this cemetery that we talked to, that showed us around, I asked him what the local, I said, what do the French think of all this? I mean, what's their attitude? We had not seen much yet. And he just said the French have a greater appreciation for what happened here and the people buried here, he says, than I think most Americans. One of the reasons, I think legitimate, is we've never been occupied. We've never had someone come in, take our farm, kill our cattle, occupy, kick us out, or let us live but be their slaves. When they were liberated, they'd been under that for 4 years, 4.5 years. And the Nazis were not Sunday school teachers. And so it helps you understand how 75 years later there's such an outpouring still of gratitude that I'm still shocked at what we saw. Every little village that we would go through, they would have like a life-size crucifix in front of the Catholic Church. It'd be all decked out with banners and American flags, and there would be a plaque there. And they had it down to the army, the division, the regiment, the company liberated our village in the evening of June 7th or June 8th. I still just can't get over it. If you ever get a chance to go, I think it heartens you and it makes you proud to be an American. Warts and all, we're the best country there is. Still. The second thing, the first thing is unfading gratitude. I was surprised at their unfaded gratitude 75 years later. It was passed on to them somehow, because very, very few of them are still alive that were there and were liberated. They maintain memorials, which involves cost. They keep them up. Every one of those American cemeteries, the local French come in and adopt several soldiers or one when they have extensive information on everyone who's buried there, unless it's the ones that they are unidentified. And so they get that soldier's birthday. If he has had a wife and an anniversary, they will go decorate that, lay flowers at the base of that cross, and do that they pass it down in their family. They maintain a memorial. They regularly practice rituals like D-Day. We went into grocery stores, and there were people dressed in 1940s clothing. I saw a guy in an old, it was period clothing. His wife with the net in the back of your hair. Their little kid had knickers, and I just couldn't get over how. And basically, if you got Levi's, if you're French and you got Levi's, you're in. That's it. And they imitated their liberators to this day. They dress up like them. They honor them. The thought then is this: as believers, but as the whole world really, we have a liberator. We were enslaved. We were under occupation, worse than anything the Nazis could ever do. We were liberated. There should be everlasting, unfading gratefulness. Second, they maintain over there, and for these kinds of sacrifices, they don't care the cost. Memorials, chapels, cemeteries. We build buildings. They perform rituals on the day that our liberator, after he died, rose from the dead for us. We gather in his memory. When we take communion, do this in remembrance of me. I'm not here, and I hope I think you understand me. Not putting some kind of a guilt trip on us. We all have to rest. God knows all that. But really, when you start thinking about it, the French don't skip even an off year. They don't skip D-Day celebration. You just don't. Why? Because we liberated them. They put their uniforms on, get their restored Jeep fired up, go live in a green canvas army tent for a week, pretend to be American soldiers. Which there's something even in that. They dress up to imitate them. Doesn't Jesus want us to do that? We're supposed to dress up like him. We're supposed to look like him. Can't we, on the days that we are to perform a ritual of coming to worship, surely for Jesus, who liberates us not only in this life, but for eternity, surely we can equal the gratitude shown by the world for earthly sacrifices. Again, I want to thank you for making it possible for us to go to this and see all the things we saw. One last quick thought that struck me. Don't know if it has much to do with anything, but it came to me, and I have to tell you. As we were standing reading a plaque, there are monuments everywhere. And we're just driving down the road, and there's this sign that says Coles, C-O-L-E-S, Coles Bayonet Charge Monument. We pulled off, and there's a picture, a map, and this, I think he was a lieutenant named Cole, and the Nazis had fortified a farmhouse and the barns and so forth, and it blocked a road, and it was on an intersection. They had to have it. They had been pinned down for 3 days trying to get that farmhouse. And finally, in World War II, fixed bayonet was not as frequent as in World War I. But he commanded his group, and this was the guy that started out with 125 and ended up with 13. Fixed bayonets, charged this farmhouse. He lived, was given the Medal of Honor for that. But it just struck me, I don't know how else to put it, but as we were reading that, and it talked about the Germans being in this farmhouse, it just came to me, look what these people who had no right to that property caused. 100+ American boys died in the farmyard of that place where these miserable people had no business being there. The devil occupies this. He has no business being in my heart. But he's taken over landlordship. It's not his. But the thought entered my mind as we came to the end of this trip. We really focused thought just on 2 people. I wanted to see John Wesley and where he preached and lived and so forth. Martin Luther. And then it struck me, we really were focused on one other person, in a sense. Hitler. Look what, in 3 different cases, 3 individuals changed history. Martin Luther changed Western civilization because he stood up for the truth no matter what. John Wesley changed English-speaking world history. I do have to quit, but in the late 1700s, 2 things happened 40 miles apart. England, under John and Charles Wesley and their preaching, went through a revival unrivaled in modern history. 40 miles across the English Channel, the French went through a revolution where blood ran in the streets, and they got rid of the church, got rid of Christianity, and have been one of the most secular nations in Western civilization ever since. People can change things. Hitler changed the world. Look at the people that he occasioned their death and the grieving of their families at home. I still remember as a little kid seeing some fading gold stars in the corners of the living room windows in some little houses. There was where a mother still lived who lost a son. People can make a huge difference for good or for evil. Well, Let's bow our heads. And we'll just dismiss with prayer. I want to, again, thank you for the trip. Thank you for being attentive through all of these vacation pictures. Dan, if you'd come and close in prayer.